Into managing relationship dynamics. These are the theories, concepts, and skills that explain a lot about interpersonal communication, even how to get started in a conversation and how to even evaluate a relationship. Or at least partially. So this video is a little bit more in depth. It will be a little bit a longer video to get through these concepts and skills. Our first theory is social exchange theory, which is the idea that we connect with other people because there's a benefit to it. And if you really look at almost anything, there's always costs and rewards. And so we are looking to have relationships with others that balance these out. And so you think about what are the advantages or the rewards of having a best friend, right? What are some of the external advantages? Personal benefits that you have. You have somebody to do something with. You have someone who will listen to you. You have somebody who can go out and do things with, right? Those would all be benefits. But then what would the costs be with your best friend? For example, what things cause stress or are annoying? Are they argumentative? Do they are always want to borrow money? Do they need a lot of your time? Those are all costs. And so the idea here is that when you're evaluating a relationship, again, friend, family, coworker, romantic, any relationship, the reward should outweigh the costs. Right? We want over time, and when somebody has a problem, it's going to cost you more. It might cost you time. It might cost you effort. You might have to help a person move, right? So you don't evaluate something based on isolated incidences. You measure it over time. Of course, this also includes abuse. And those are costs that are way too high, and the rewards never outweigh those costs. And in relationships these days, can be a real struggle and source of stress. And we have free counseling at TCC. Every university has free counseling. We want to be able to help you get through your education. Whatever life circumstances you are facing right now, we have resources to help. I know it's a little off topic, but if you need food, we have food pantries. We have resources for housing, etc. So if you're stuck in any life challenges, you want to talk to me about it, and I can shoot you to the right direction. Go to the help word I find on our course menu for community resources as well as TCC resources. We want to help you. And we know that a lot of times life issues and relationships create issues that prevent us from continuing with our education. So we want to help. In abusive relationships, the rewards never outweigh those costs. And there is help for you or for you to help a friend if that's the scenario. Let's look at reducing uncertainty. A lot of you have mentioned social anxiety, uncertainty. There's uncertainty as far as giving speeches, but let's look at some strategies that we can use to help when we're facing any uncertain type of situations. It could be a first day of class, it could be a job interview, it could be a first date, first day on the job. Any situations that we're facing uncertainty, let's look at some strategies that we can use to reduce that or minimize it. Uncertainty reduction theory suggests that we need to have more information in order to get closer to that person or to separate from that person. Or even the situation. And so there are 3 different strategies you can use. Passive strategies just include observing and monitoring. So let's say you were invited to a really fancy corporate dinner and you sit down at the table and there's 5 forks on the left and 3 spoons on the right, and then there's your silverware above your plate, and you're not even sure what's happening because you've never had a really formal dinner before. And so what do? Use a passive strategy. Observe other people, monitor other people and what they do, and think through it, of course. Don't just do what they do, but monitor that. If you're in a job interview and you're wondering if you can be humorous, pay attention to the interviewer. Are they offering any humor? And if so, then you might be a little bit more lighthearted, but you never outdo the interviewer. You keep it real reserved. Okay. Active strategy would be checking with a third party, right? That would be asking another person. And so you could possibly, if you're at that formal dinner, you could possibly whisper to the person next to you or the server possibly, which fork do I use, right? If you're at a social event and you find somebody that you think is attractive and you're not sure if you should go talk to them or not, sometimes you have a friend figure that out, or have your friend walk by and see if they can find anything. That would be an active strategy. Okay. Interactive strategies, that's actually talking to the person for information. And this is something that you could use a perception check to do this. And you can just ask some questions, start up a conversation, and figure out if that person is single or available, right? That's scarier though, right? And so you can pick and choose passive strategies, active strategies, interactive. And there's some more details on this in your book, but they're great skills to have. Put those in your tool belt and pull them out as you need them. So let's talk about that and that very first conversation, because that is one of those situations where a lot of you are uncertain. This is where a lot of people struggle who have social anxiety, which my daughter happens to have. And so first conversations, use some of those strategies we just talked about. If you're in a classroom, I know it's so hard, we're all online, you'd ask, do you know anything about this class? Have you heard anything about this class? Right? That's an active strategy where you're just talking to the person next to you, right? And so that's one way to start. Find something you have in common. Well, how do you do that? Well, if you're in the class, you already have something in common, right? Or if you're in the workplace, you already have something in common. So that's a starting point. And so you can start talking about the things you have in common. Or you notice they have the same backpack or the same kind of shoes, right? So you can start out by asking great questions. So I recommend, especially if you have social anxiety, that you come up with a handful of questions that you can ask almost anybody to start a conversation. Put it on a 3x5 card. Anytime you're going to a place or a situation where you probably need to have a conversation, look at your card before you go in and review the questions. If you already have questions planned that you can ask of anybody, that's perfect. Then that minimizes your anxiety because you already know what to ask. So just have a few questions written down that you can always ask. A good conversationalist is really a great listener. So when you ask a question, just listen to their answer and then ask a follow-up question. Right? Oh, tell me more about that. Or could you explain? I'd love to know more about that. Right? And then have them answer the follow-up question. So you don't have to necessarily come up with new questions. Just listen and follow up. It's a great tip. Right? Let them do the talking and you listen and then ask follow-up questions. You can always start a conversation by giving or receiving compliments, but we want these to be genuine, right? We want you to be sincere because we usually can tell whether you're phony about it, or like pickup lines. You've seen those in television shows, movies. I don't know. Some of you may have tried them in yourself, but people joke about pickup lines, right? And a lot of them are really corny, but they're humorous. And so sometimes that works and sometimes that doesn't work. And that's a whole nother fun conversation we would have if we were face-to-face in class, right? On pickup lines and how effective they are. So be genuine, right? I like Vera Bradley bags. I tend to note when somebody else has Vera Bradley bags. So I start conversations with anybody and everybody that has a Vera Bradley. That's a brand of a handbag, for those of you who don't know. Colorful prints, I like them a lot, right? And so that's giving. But what about receiving compliments? How good are you? I'm pausing on purpose here because how do we typically respond? We tend to downplay the compliment. We tend to deny it. Oh, no, this is just an old thing I had. This is just an old top, right? We downplay the compliment, which really then is very insulting to the person who's complimenting you because you're saying their opinion isn't valid. So we want to learn how to receive compliments. Say, thank you. That's so kind of you to say that. I appreciate that. That's how to receive a compliment. So those are a few tips on first conversations. Of course, our interpersonal communication class is also really good with learning how to improve those one-on-one communication skills. All right, so now we're diving into dialectical tensions. Dialectical tensions are perspectives or aspects of our self, things that we need that we all have to deal with. And unfortunately, most of them they're opposing forces. And so here's what happens. These are needs that we have. And when we're connecting with other people, they have these needs too. And so it's trying to find the balance. Some have a need for more connection. Some are more autonomous. They need more time alone. It doesn't mean that they only need time by themselves. They need to be connected with other people. But we have different degrees. So if you're extroverted, you have a stronger need for connection with people. If you're introverted, you're more autonomous. Some of you are more open as far as disclosing information about yourself, and some of you are more private. Some of you have the need for more planned, scheduledness, etc., and some of you are like the more new, spontaneous types of things. And so what happens in relationships is we all have different needs and we have different amounts of that need. So if opposites attract, well, that's a thing. Right? And so chances are an extroverted is connected with an introverted, and some people are more open and more private. But the people that are private, they still need to disclose and connect with the other people. But you have to work that out and you have to negotiate that. Right? All relationships are going to take work. They don't happen automatically. So I have a stronger need for connection. I'm extroverted. My husband's introverted. I am definitely more open. He's more private. I am the predictable one, more planned and scheduled, and he's the spontaneous one. And so we have to make sure that there's a balance. We have to respect people's privacy, but you also have to disclose and open up. And so you have to work through these. These are sources. You're going to see this in our conflict chapter as well. These are sources of conflict if you don't learn to negotiate and recognize that the extroverted person needs to have time with you as the introverted person because they want to be connected, but the introverted person needs time alone, and it's nothing personal to the extroverted person. And we sometimes feel like, oh, they just don't like me anymore. No, they just need time by themselves. So let's not make it what it's not. An introverted person needs time to themselves and they need some privacy, and it has nothing to do with us. So we negotiate, what does that look like? How does this work? Because these are all needs that we have. We're all going to have different needs and amounts of these needs, and if we don't negotiate how this is going to work in our relationship, they will be the source of a conflict in the future. So it's really important to figure these out and work through them. All right, so let's dive into disclosure. You cannot get to know someone or maintain relationships without disclosure. All right, you all heard of TMI. What is that? Too much information. Too much information for whom? Oh, it's the person receiving the message. So who determines TMI? The person receiving the information. But how do we disclose information, and what information do we disclose to others? There are some appropriateness and maybe not so appropriateness when it comes to disclosure. So we'll spend the next few minutes understanding disclosure and how it works. Disclosure is voluntarily providing information to others that they would not know or learn if you didn't tell them. And so we need to look at, there's an appropriateness level there, as well as we have to consider reciprocity. There needs to be a balance in the relationship of the disclosing. If one person does all the disclosing, that's out of balance. Now, I'm not talking about those one-time exceptions where the friend has a problem and they're doing all the disclosing. Again, you measure this over time. So what does this look like, and how do we decide what to disclose? Our social penetration model discusses disclosure, and there are different types of information that we share. There's different topics, and that's all what we call the breadth, all on the outside of like the onion. We're going to peel the layers back and go more in depth. So we talk about the variety of subjects with a person, but we also have the degree of how in depth do we go. And so we have, I like to look at it as a target, right? Out in the outer ring, that's more superficial level. Right? Those are your facts, the weather, the sports, right? The casual conversations. Oh, did you do your assignment? Those kinds of things, right? The middle blue ring here, the first outer ring, dark blue ring, is more personal. That's on a more intimate level. It's usually more, our opinions are included. Opinions are more in-depth than facts. And then all the way in the center of our target is your very intimate level, and that's in-depth and feelings-based. And so it depends on who the person is. If it's a stranger, you usually stick with the more superficial level. If you're developing a relationship, you grow it by then sharing, and you go more in-depth, more opinions, more feelings. But not too much too soon, because that could be a problem as well. So you could actually draw on one of these models, put all the topics you talk about with that person all around the outside: music, school, work, family, finances, love life, right? All of those things. And then how much time do you spend? You can make a slice of pie for each one of those, and how in depth do you go? So those are things to consider with disclosure. So keep that in the back of your mind. You're also introduced to communication privacy management in this chapter. It's basically about securing your privacy, creating boundaries, etc. And you're also introduced to strategic topic avoidance. You can learn how to maneuver the conversation away from things you don't want to talk about. And so the book gives you a few tips on that. There are some tips here on evaluating disclosure, so you can just pause this and read through those questions, but ask yourself those questions is really helpful. Also, you want to consider Johari Window. This is not in our textbook, but it sure helps you see this concept. You'd get this in the interpersonal class. So there's this model of a window with 4 window panes, and each box is a different pane, and there's a name for it. So the left side of the window, the left column, is known to self, and then the right column in this window is the unknown self. And then when you look at the rows, that also is specific information. So the open pane is the information that you know about yourself and other people know, right? The hidden pane is things you know about yourself that is unknown to others. The blind pane is something that you don't know about yourself that others do, like my teenage daughter's tone of voice. She doesn't hear it, but I do. Right? And the unknown pane is things that you don't know about yourself yet, and nor do other people. And while it's nice and even in this particular model here on the left, the reality is everybody has different size window panes. Some are more open, right? That goes back to those dialectical tensions. Some people are more open and some people are more private. So those that are extroverted have a larger open pane. Those that are introverted will have a larger hidden pane. But it allows you to see, again, how you're disclosing with others in general, or you could look at this with specific relationships. So these are all of your tips on managing relationship dynamics, things that are naturally occurring, and some tips on how to minimize uncertainty, start a conversation, work through those dialectical tensions, and learn how to disclose in a more appropriate and effective manner.